So, hey, Soul Sisters, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Mikaila Cruz. Makayla is a yoga and meditation teacher, best-selling author, and entrepreneur from New York City. She combines the 8 limbs of yoga with alignment, creating a dynamic flow that empowers individuals on their journey of healing and self-discovery. As the voice for humanity's evolutionary movement, Makayla's mindful practice is shared with all levels of yoga and meditation. A best-selling co-author of Pursuing Your Destiny, Makayla has been featured as an expert on CNN, NBC, and BBC. While she is widely known for her teachings and spiritual guidance, her path was deeply shaped by her experience as a 9/11 survivor. That day changed the course of her life, leading her to seek deeper meaning, resilience, and healing, both for herself and for others. Rather than letting trauma define her, she has used it as a catalyst to inspire transformation, guiding others to move through fear, embrace presence, and step fully into their power. Thank you, Makayla, for being here on the Hey Soul Sister podcast. And for many of you who don't know, I have actually met you, Makayla. I think it was back in 2018. We had met in New York City, where Whitley and I were actually starting our own YouTube channel, where we were starting kind of this movement where we would share inspiring stories where people have gone through similar, trauma, but have taken that trauma to as a catalyst to inspire, growth and transformation and healing in other people. And so doing this now, the Hey Soul Sister podcast, we really wanted to have you back on because, one, we're in a different space, and two, you're in a different space. And I think that the story is, to almost 24 years now since 9/11 happened, but that didn't define you, although it did transform your life in many ways. And so thank you for being here, Makai.
No, thank you. Thank you both for having me on today.
Yeah, so we just wanted to really know who you are before all of that, like, who you are as an individual, and then we can go into the story of what happened and what transpired.
Well, I think, first of all, I think 9/11 in itself was a day in history, but I had a history before 9/11. A lot of people did. And so my life was simply a Wall Street worker who partied with her friends in New York City. I was basically the epitome of the characters on Sex and the City. It's the easiest way to explain my life. Basically putting tomatoes on your credit card because you spent all the money on a pair of shoes. And I find that to be something that people are like, well, that would have made her shallow, but it was actually what happened when I was growing up in New York. I only had friends, and they meant everything to me. And though my world completely shattered and then shaped my future on 9/11, it's almost as if my life had to go through the shopping sprees and the drinking and everything else to actually make me see what was truly important since that day.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that, the difference of, like, it's almost like night and day, right? Going through some of these experiences that are so challenging or so traumatic can really shift us as a being, right? And, I'd love for you to kind of take us back to that day and where you were and what you remember and what really vividly stood out on that day for you as well, Makayla.
On the morning of September 11th, many people who were in New York City knew that it was such a gorgeous morning. It was part of Indian summer, so it was supposed to be like 75 or 78 degrees that day. Sky was clear, and I was supposed to arrive at work on my regular time, which was 9:15, but I was asked to work on a project that I was asked to come in at 8:30 that morning. So as fate would have it, I walked in and I saw some coworkers. I sat down at my desk, put my briefcase and purse down, and I received a call from a guy that I was seeing at the time that I'd broken up with 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. And he said, "How is your day going?" And I was annoyed And I just said, look, I can't talk. I'm working on a project. I've been up since 1 o'clock the previous morning, working on stuff. And as soon as I hung up the phone, that was when an engine of a plane, I heard it. And I was on the 95th floor of Tower 2. So even at that point, we're so high up, but we never heard the roar of an airplane engine overhead. This time, I heard the roar of an airplane engine and then a boom, and then the office windows around me shattered. So I overheard someone's yell from the other side of the floor. I think a plane just hit Tower 1, he said. And so I grabbed my briefcase and my purse. I ran to the stairwell, and my coworker, Laurie, grabbed my arm and she said, you can't take the stairs. And I said, well, that's what we do. In an emergency situation, we always grab the stairs. I go take the stairs. I just said, no, you're taking the elevator with me. She pulled me into the elevator. We got to the 90th floor. 90th floor was comprised of the legal department and HR. We heard when the doors opened, one person came in. So it was just myself, Lori, and our coworker, Andrew, and then a person, Dave, who ran in. So 4 of us in the elevator, nobody else got in. We ascended to the 78th floor, which is the main elevator bank of Tower 2. And that's when chaos erupted. We saw people trying to push their way into the elevators. And the main elevator bank, those elevators they would be able to hold many people. But in this case, everybody was trying to come in. And all of a sudden, I just hear someone say, there's no more people. We can't fit any more people. And at that moment, I actually felt that I had died. I thought that the people who were around me when the plane hit, we were all done. But of course we weren't. We descended into the lobby. Laurie went one way to Liberty Street. I found myself alone. I called my manager who was working from home that day, and I said, what should I do? And she said, oh my God, don't go back. So before I got into the lobby, I saw one of my coworkers, and she was walking into the elevator because Port Authority announced that nothing was wrong with Tower 2, that everybody should go back to their desk. Of course, not knowing what would happen to Tower 2. So as I was walking toward the lobby, I hung up with my manager, and then all of a sudden I heard a roar of another airplane engine. As soon as I was walking out of the lobby into the street, I didn't see a plane. I heard it. And all of a sudden I heard another boom. And when that happened, before the second plane hit, there were papers and debris and things on fire, papers on fire already. But when that second plane hit, it erupted so much that people were running and screaming, and I was knocked into the ground, pretty much to the core. And my coworker Andrew found me, and he said, we have to get out of here. So we walked to South Street Seaport, which is like 5 blocks away. And when we got there, I had a Palm Pilot back then. It was a popular thing back then to communicate. And I sent an email to my ex-boyfriend, the one I just spoken to. And I said, I'm okay. Can you please let my mom and my brother know that I'm okay? Andrew was with me. He went to use a payphone, and all of a sudden, the Tower 2 started to collapse. When it started to collapse, we could see it. We could see it start to collapse, and we actually thought that the tower was going to collapse on top of us. It looked like it was swaying, but it collapsed on itself. But the debris, when the debris came, we were completely covered in. My blouse was like completely covered in like silver debris, dust, dirt, and we calmly said, we have to get out of here. And so hundreds of us were just walking up the FDR Drive and just walking until we were able to get out of the situation. So I walked from the South Street Seaport to 35th Street and 3rd Avenue. My coworker Andrew took the ferry to New Jersey, and I found myself in a cab home to my mom's house, and it took me 5 hours to take a cab that would normally take me 20 minutes. And so when I got home, my brother my brother couldn't believe that I was alive. He hugged me and he said, I can't believe it. And my mom was working at the she was working for the city. And she saw the first plane as it hit. And she said, that's not the tower my daughter's in. My daughter's okay. So she was trying to call me at the office. She couldn't get me. She was watching as a second plane hit my building and then she collapsed. Um, they, they shut down the federal building. They dragged her out. And so I got to my mom's house at 3 o'clock. She arrived at 3:15 and she didn't know if I was dead or alive. She realized that the tower collapsed and she thought that I was gone. So both of them, when they saw me, they thought they were seeing a ghost because they couldn't believe that I was actually alive.
And you had some friends that unfortunately, sadly, stayed in their office, right, Makayla?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So my good friend Ryan, he was there and they all said, stay at your desk, there's nothing wrong. So when the second plane hit below our floor. So I don't know if he was trying to get out. I don't know how he tried. But he's gone and I think about him often.
Oh. How do you honor your friends today?
By living.
Mm.
By living. And I know it sometimes to say that it doesn't seem, it seems like it's just not a weak way, but just kind of saying, well, I'm alive and they're gone. It's basically if I know that every year that person never was able to run another marathon, able to have children, able to get married, all these things, I can say to myself, well, maybe if I can remember them by participating in the 9/11 Memorial Run or donating some to to a charity that their families belong to, it's a way for me to honor them in some way.
Makayla, like I can't even begin to imagine, living out that scenario as a reality. And, when something like that happens, it's so unexpected. And so it's just it's so fast too, right? And, what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind as you were navigating just that chaos and getting out of the building?
Well, when something very important happened when I was at the South Street Seaport, I saw a man sitting alone on the ground. He had his briefcase. He looked like one of my coworkers. He was great suit, and he was sitting there, and his head was down, and he saw me with the Palm Pilot, and he said, "Do you have internet on your Palm Pilot?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Can you check the news?" And when I checked the news, the Pentagon was hit. So I told him, and he said, "It's over." And in my mind, I said, "No, it's not." So I had to really take myself out of the situation with all the shock and with all the horror. I had to convince myself that no, it's not over. I'm still here. This guy's still here. We have to get out of here. As someone who looked so masculine and so strong, when he walked away, he was hysterical crying. And I realized this is hitting us in a very, very deep, the magnitude of what we felt. It was beyond anything that anybody ever imagined it would be. Not what you see on TV, not what you hear on the radio. This is when you're in front of it, it doesn't seem real. But every day you can be reminded of that experience and just move through it.
Yeah, and it's been almost 24 years, Makayla. My question is, because I know with the trauma and things that, even with losing people that you love, like it feels like yesterday that it happened. And so for you, how do you deal with that trauma in your life? Because that's something that doesn't go away, and I'm sure it stays with you at moments and triggers at some moments. How do you handle that?
I honestly believe that meditation helps me stay exactly in the moment that I'm in and breathing in the exact moment that I'm in. Lao Tzu, he's one of the mentors that I've learned from all these years, who said, if you're worrying about the past, you're not living. If you're worrying about the future, you're not living. If you're living in the present, you are free. So I'm free of the past when I'm thinking about the present, but I'm not going to say that I'm not triggered just being in New York City. I'm not ice. I'm triggered when I go downtown. One of my favorite Chinese vegan restaurants is a few blocks away from the 9/11 memorial. And what I do every year since I've been back in New York, this is how I deal with the trauma. I turn off my phone and and people already know this, I do not communicate with anybody until 3 o'clock that afternoon because I'm honoring the people who have passed. And I go to that Chinese restaurant. I never go to the memorial, and I have my lunch and I come back home. I cry if I have to, and I live through it.
I just want to say, wow, it is. And you are so incredibly brave and strong. And I think it's just absolutely inspiring and so empowering, Makayla, to see, to see you go through something that has been traumatic for so many, and for you to take that and to really turn it into good, to really turn that into fuel to the purpose and what you do today, and how you've been able to also help others in their journey. And I think that, Sherry and I were so excited to have you come on to the podcast today, because I think it's stories like yours. It's hearing women's voices like yours that really give others that hope and that faith and courage to be able to overcome the things in their life, and there's so many of us out there that face trauma, and trauma can look different for every single one of us. And I think that when folks feel trauma, when they've had to experience that, for some it can be really debilitating and hard to move through that. And yeah, and so I just want to take a moment just to honor and acknowledge your courage and your strength to showing up. And again, just to thank you to being here and sharing your story with everyone, because I know that for our listeners, they could be experiencing trauma of their own. They have their own stories and their own experiences. And so I think that the things that you're sharing today, Makayla, is something that can really help others too, through their journey. So I just wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge you for that, and to thank you for your courage.
Well, I appreciate that so much. The reason why I feel that my story, even though it's a story that, because not everybody was there, but I want people to understand that, and I've said this before in other talks, that everybody has experienced their own version of 9/11. So if you have a tragic loss of someone, or if you lose your job unexpectedly, the feeling of loss and the feeling of debilitation, like you said, it could be all relative. And that's what can make us feel like we're not alone in our experience. We are seriously not alone, because if you know there's somebody out there who's experiencing something different, the same, but in a different scenario, at least you don't feel so segregated from life. And I think that's what a lot of people think. I think after COVID, we felt isolated from life, separated and segregated. And the way I tell my story is just like that, just the feeling that you're not alone.
You probably met a lot of people who have gone through different traumas, and you have been a part of healing. And what does that life look like for you today, in the, doing yoga and meditation and on the spiritual path that you're on? What does that look like for Makayla right now?
Well, since it was a while since we met, but I made the decision that I don't want to limit myself to teaching in the US. And it's not just a limitation, it's just that I wanted to broaden my perspective. I wanted to teach people of other cultures, religions, fitness, their fitness levels. So a lot of my clients have emerged from beginner yoga to marathon runners, um, CrossFit people, because they have different mindsets. So I think that, because next week I'll be in Hawaii teaching, and then in Denver later on this year, and then Honduras in August. So I feel like that's really where my path is, not just staying put, really spreading my wings.
I love that. We are going to call you because we're going to have some retreats. We're
Yes.
going to call you. Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. There's a reason for everything, right?
Oh, that is so exciting. Oh, that's so exciting.
I just felt drawn to you for some reason, even like back then when we connected, I felt drawn to you. And the fact that you said yes to doing the interview, like you didn't even bat an eye. You were just like, yes, yes, yes. You know how hard it is to get people with that many followers to come do a podcast? It's hard because people are busy, and I understand that. We totally get that. But I feel like you have this greater purpose in your life where you're like, I need to spread a message. I need to make a difference.
Yes, exactly. And, honestly, that interview that we did was not easy for me. That interview that we did back then, because obviously it was in the Oculus, and that had not, if that didn't happen on 9/11, that would not have been built. It was built for the purpose to re-emerge, to rebuild. So that was very difficult for me. And you actually helped me be present in that moment, despite how close it was to everything that happened. So I loved that. That experience with you actually propelled me to spread my wings more and to teach more and to just express the way I feel about that experience more and more, but in a way that is more relative and not so, it's all my story. It's not our story.
Wow. I need some Kleenex. Not having.
I know.
And the fact that
Don't do
you
that.
let me take your picture in the middle of the Oculus, like remember that?
I came into Hanumanasana split, and you see people coming in, and
there's
they're just
people
like
walking around with briefcases. Like, I'm going to
like,
work. Huh? They're like, what is this woman doing in the middle of the Oculus with the split?
It was such an experience. It was such an experience.
I remember that photo actually.
Like, so I can put it up.
Hey, it just popped in my mind. That's right too,
Yeah.
because I remember the background, like inside, it's really bright. It's almost like white, right? And yeah. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful. And Makayla, like we're talking about how you've really taken everything that you like, your experiences and how you're showing up today and really helping so many other human beings. I'm really curious to know, like, what led you into finding your path? Like, what we know the catalyst, but like, what did it look like you actually finding and stepping onto that path? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
It's a great question, because I didn't know that my path was right before me. Everybody's path is right before them. It's right here. It's just that us getting out of our heads and really just seeking where we are right now. I don't know if you're familiar with the author Carolyn Miss, but Oprah asked her years ago, she said, how do you know when you're on the right path? And she said, it's when you're not sacrificing your happiness for someone else. You are not betraying yourself. When you betray yourself, whether you're in a relationship, job, family life, if you're not who you are, you're not on your right path. You're on a path, but you're not on the right one. And once you know that you are free of the experiences, when you're not carrying the baggage of somebody else's emotions, and you're free to do that, and then you're looking ahead, some things start to come about. It may not be immediate. It could be weeks from then. But it was when I decided to start traveling to teach yoga, all I did was post a story that said, don't give me anything for Valentine's Day, just give me a plane ticket. And one of my former students said, I live in Hawaii and I want you to come out and teach. Expenses paid. That doesn't usually happen, but you have to know that there's something when you're putting something out there with your mind, really understanding that. And then someone just comes to you, you have to just remember that it came from somewhere. It came from a seed that you planted years ago, months ago. That's how I know you're on the path, because what you see and what you envision and what happens, it's going to be a match depending on where you're feeling here, not here.
Yeah. And I really wanted to ask this too, Makayla, because you made a really great point about like you putting that statement out, but and then another human being kind of like showing up and allowing you to kind of like take that next step. Do you feel like when we do show up that way, we'll say like the universe, higher power, creator, whatever we want to call it, sort of steps in and co-creates and assists us as soon as we kind of like put our hand up, we're like, okay, we're ready to like step onto that path. What are your thoughts on that?
Surrender. Yeah.
I believe, I believe that when you stop wanting and you just, you lose the whole like feeling about what's going to happen with the outcome, how is that going to work for me? If I think I'm going to be in Hawaii next year, for me to keep saying, I want to go to Hawaii. I desire to go to Hawaii. You're putting yourself in a situation where you're telling the universe, higher power, God, whatever, that you're still in the state of wanting. You're not having. And when, like you said, showing up, you have to meet that expectation head on and not feel like there's no way there's no way that can happen. But it
Yeah.
does happen. And so, and what I think also when we're so tied to outer experiences, we forget how much it happens in our lives.
I
It
know.
really does. Whether it be like you meet someone that you just feel like you have a kindred, that person's a kindred spirit. You don't realize that months ago you were thinking, that would be great if I met someone who actually practices yoga or I can go to the gym with. And all of a sudden that person just
How do we
shows up.
step more into the having versus the wanting?
I love them.
Surrender, like Sherry said.
Letting
Completely
go.
surrendering, like
Yeah.
letting go of the, you have the idea and the idea is great, but let go of the need to have it. And Buddha said the biggest form of the biggest form of suffering is expectations, expecting things to be, expecting people to be a certain way. When you just surrender and say, let them be,
Yeah.
we can just all of a sudden open our hearts and everything else can come to us. Like the universe will just spill over.
Damn, I need a tissue because
Oh,
I'm going through it
Sherry.
right now. I feel like
Yeah.
this is also relevant to what you're saying is also relevant to what we've been going through on a personal
Oh,
level. We've been talking about surrender, letting go of control. A lot of weird stuff has been happening. A lot of like awakening moments or like identity shifts have been happening. And
yes.
I think that you can relate to identity shifts or awakenings because it feels like you have been through those stages. But like you get to a certain point on your journey because you've been through so much that you start to see the truth of things and you start to see things come to you because you let go. And you're like,
Yes.
whoa, like those things I tried to control, I realize now were not for me. And those things I let go of because I knew they were for me came to me. And so it's like really there is no art to it. It's just being. And I think it's like a lot of people put so much like this manual on how to manifest. And I don't believe that manifestation is as hard as people make it out to be. I think it's very easy to do if you just follow your own intuition, you follow your identity, who you are, as you said, and you follow that path. And like the things that come to you are going to flow to you and they're going to feel good to you because they're already yours, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I think the whole push and pull struggle is actually not wanting what we want. It's actually letting go of the things that no longer serve us because they seem comfortable, because we haven't realized how complacent we have become in
Mm-hmm.
our own lives. Whether it's fear that keeps us from doing it or just feeling comfortable enough to just deal with it for the next 10 years. It is, I think it's when that's a form of betraying yourself for not taking
Right.
risks and not like you said, like being with your own identity, knowing who you really are, how powerful you are. This is how I visualize anything now. I consider myself the embodiment of a connection to God. So if if there's a source called the universe, God, whatever, and I'm deep and I'm completely connected to that, my life experiences will be good, bad. It's how I see them. It's the perception of that, whether it's having something happen to me or for me,
Oh,
or when you lose someone. If you're like I dated this guy, it didn't work out, but I don't know why it didn't work out. Doesn't matter. I felt like he was removed from my life. He was empty. Like, I feel like my cup was being emptied so that somebody else can come in. And now I'm with somebody for the last 2 years and it's really good. I had to empty the cup. We have to empty our cups. We cannot keep filling our cups with crap. That's not how that's not how abundance comes into life. It just doesn't.
It's so on point as to like Sherry saying everything that we've been experiencing for the last like couple of months, and then like for the last few weeks. I was saying to her, it's almost like these are things that like we've known, but for whatever reason, like just lately, it feels as though all of the things that we know are like clicking into place like a puzzle, right? And we're seeing the whole picture with so much clarity, where it just feels like it makes so much sense. Whereas before, it's like we knew all the pieces, but we didn't quite have the clarity that we feel and know. And it's like an inner knowing. It's like a deep, like soul knowing of these things. And it's just, yeah, it's so timely, Kyla. And when you talk about really just kind of being in that space energetically and, letting go of the things, like I'd love for you to share a little bit about what does that look like for people? So if anyone is tuning in and listening to this episode, how can they recognize when they really do need to let go, get rid of some of the stuff in the cup so that they can allow those new things, those better things in?
Well, another thing I've learned is when you're feeling lost and you have no idea why, that's a sign that you're carrying somebody else's emotions.
mm,
If you're sitting there saying, why do I feel stressed out? Everything's okay, but I'm feeling something. You're carrying the weight of somebody else. And when you realize that, when you make that connection and you make that decision, it's all about choices. You can make that choice that you're carrying somebody else's emotions. Oh wow, okay, so you take it like a bag. Oh, this is not my bag. It's like you're in the baggage claim. Oh, that's not my bag. Give it to the right person, the person who is actually experiencing that, and this is their lesson, not yours. That was the biggest. And also a quote that I heard another podcast. Every choice, every change that you've made is a choice. So if you haven't made any changes, that's been your choice the whole time. And I think it's also taking accountability for the things that, if you're aware of whatever happened in your life and you're not ready to move on from that, that's your choice. It shouldn't be the choice of somebody else to try to make you change or make you see something differently, because that's not how we're built. We came here alone in our own journey. So it's just like in yoga, nobody else practices with you on the mat. It's your mat. So how can somebody else can modify it, sure, but who's on that journey? It's you that's on the journey. And I think that's the only way that I can explain how we could find that awareness, to be on our own journey and not feel the weight of other people, experiences, the past,
mm,
what you're anticipating about the future, that a lot of people are now saying, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow? And why? Why?
yeah,
No
that's going
reason.
on a lot now, right? With the news and everything, like people are worried about the future and they're on the social media and the news and the new president and all of the stuff happening. So that can take you out of your frequency in some way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Completely just take you out of your own, what is your reality? Is your reality tomorrow? Is it right now? You're
Yeah.
living right now.
So you're saying be present, live in the moment, and let go of the baggage that is not yours.
Yes.
I love that.
The biggest, I guess the biggest analogy, like the simplest analogy is you're
Yeah.
in the baggage claim
Yeah.
and all these bags are holding energy from other people. And you know that's not your bag, but you're going to take it because you think that maybe you'll help them with the bag. Okay, you can help them with the bag, but you don't
Love that.
leave the bag.
That's, yeah,
Wow.
it
That's a
is.
great
I have
analogy.
like, okay,
Yeah.
so I have this
Thank
really
you.
deeper question for you. And again, it's just, I'm gonna ask this because I really want to know like what your thoughts and insights are around this. So something that Sherry and I have been talking about is, perception of reality, and a lot of to do with like our frequency and the way that we show up, and especially where there's so much happening in the world right now and there's so much uncertainty out there. But you see a lot of people, I'll say like quote unquote waking up, people who are starting to realize that they are more than just this, physical human body, and that there is more to this life and this world that we all live in. And there's been so much like talk, I think, especially like in the spiritual type of world where a lot of spiritual leaders have talked about 3D versus 5D, and this perspective on, you know, folks who are not necessarily awakened, are kind of still living and vibrating on this 3D plane. But the folks who are starting to wake up and ascend spiritually are sort of like shifting more into this 5D plane. And I'm really, really curious to know, is this something that you've heard of? Is this something that you've explored? And like, really, like, what are your thoughts and insights on this, if so?
That's it's so crazy that you mentioned this because I've been reading a lot about 5D and I didn't there was no label 24 years ago, but I felt that the veil was lifted a year after 9/11. I felt that I had to really understand why I was here. And so with the
Mhm.
survivor's guilt and everything else, I had to really hone in on who I was and what my life was going to be if I didn't have the same job. I was living in Florida. I wasn't even living at home anymore. I was living in a completely different state with a completely different person. And that in itself, I felt that that was a part of I was there like between 3D and 4D. I hadn't I haven't evolved into that 5D until about a year and a half ago. And the reason why I knew that it was a 5D experience was I was walking, it was not too far from my office. It was like maybe on 40, I'm on 42nd, so it's probably like 40th Street. I'm walking, and all of a sudden I felt this immense feeling of absolute peace. Now I'm walking during the day, so thousands of people, and I felt like I was completely alone. And I felt that it wasn't happiness, it wasn't sadness, it wasn't indifference, it wasn't boredom. I didn't feel like I was myself. I stepped out of myself and I was walking freely with no worry, nothing. And this happened 3 times. First time, it lasted 20 seconds, but I realized that was happening. The second time, it was a minute. The third time, I was in Brooklyn and it happened out of nowhere. I was coming out of the subway and I felt completely free of all worry, of everything. This lasted for 5 minutes. And the danger of that is when that's what you want all the time. My teacher was like, no, this is not something that you have to go through all the time because then you'll be more upset with your life if you can't have it all the time.
Mhm.
So it comes in spurts. So that's my experience where you don't the reality that we see in our everyday life is not reality. It's what our minds tell us to see. And that's why in meditation we see we're not the mind, we're not even the body. That's a mantra that I tend to say. I am not the mind, I am not the body. So who am I then? And why do we say my mind is clear, my mind is chaotic? Because you already know that you're not the mind. I'm not saying I am mind. I'm saying my mind, my arm, my hand. We're completely separate, but duality. So, yeah. So
Wow.
that's my version of 5D.
I've never heard that before. That's pretty cool. I've heard of like timeline jumping, like people say they've timeline jumped, but and I don't know like really how that works, but I've never heard of someone saying that they experienced that kind of like you know how they like describe dying, like on the other side where it's like complete bliss and happiness.
That's
And
what I felt.
that's what
That's
it was.
exact. It was complete bliss where
Mm.
as if I'm here, but my body was just not feeling any tension about anything. But I wasn't happy. It was just
Peace.
just comfort, just
You
complete
mentioned
comfort.
4D, and I'm really curious now, like what is 4D? Yeah, what is 4D?
Well, for me, 4D was a complete letting go of the person that I was and knowing that it's the complete acceptance of what my life would be now after a year of going through this healing.
Mm.
It was I felt like a veil was lifted. I don't know how else to explain it. Just there was a veil that was covering my eyes for so long
Mm-hmm.
with past abusive relationships, with just abuse in general. And I had to really just say, you know what? Who am I? It's not the person that I was. And that awareness I felt like I was kind of evolving in a big way at 4D.
Wow. That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that and like being so vulnerable with your experience with me, like even with Whitley and I today, but even with me and Whitley those years ago. Like, thank you for doing that time and time again and to sharing your message with everyone consistently. You are a light, you're a gift. You're here for a reason. I believe that. And this experience that you're going through is helping other people. And hopefully this episode will help a lot of people in that way as well. And not to say you have to go through, 9/11 or a complete, like a huge traumatic experience, but all of us have that thing in common where, we struggle to find our identity and we want to know who we are. We want to live in that peace and that, and we will have struggles. Like, we're human. We're here for that human experience. I believe that we're not all always going to be positive and sunshine and rainbows,
That's
then
right.
yeah, what's the point? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. There's no growth. I don't see growth happening when everything is, rainbows and unicorns. I don't.
It's about awareness, right? Like you
Mhm.
said earlier, you said it's awareness. It's about being aware of the people that you're holding on to their baggage, the people that are weighing you down, and the awareness of who you are at the end of the day.
If there's
Exactly.
one
Yeah.
thing that you would tell your younger self, what would it be?
That despite how it is, everything always works itself.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Makayla.
Oh, thank you both. No, this has been incredible. I'm so happy and grateful that I was able to spend this time with you.
Do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Yes, I'm writing my next book. And so, yeah, so I have about 20,000 words so far. My goal is at least 45, and that
Mm.
would be about 200 pages. But I think by the end of the year, I'll be finished with
Can
it.
you tell us a
So,
little bit about the book? Is there anything you can tell us?
yes, a lot of people think, okay, well, she survived 9/11. Everything has been going up for her because she's a professional speaker, she's a yoga teacher. But there was a time 9 years ago when I had a complete breakdown. I felt myself at ground zero again.
Wow.
And that's how the book starts, where I was awake for 72 hours on autopilot. I was walking my dog, but I didn't realize that I was actually awake that whole time. And I looked at the clock and it was 9:30, and I thought it was 9:30 at night. It was 9:30 in the morning. That's how the book starts.
Wow. Do you have a
No,
name? Okay.
I do not.
So we will
I
look
do
out
not.
for the book. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
We'll
Yeah, I had
definitely be
a few
sharing.
ideas. Yeah, I had a few ideas, but nothing really stuck.
Yeah, yeah. You have to
So,
wait for that right moment, right?
exactly.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
like, oh, it's gonna
Yes.
come to me. I'll probably
Yeah,
be like walking somewhere and it'll show up or cooking
exactly.
or it doesn't matter.
Yes, absolutely. Inspiration comes from everywhere. So,
Mm, I believe that. And thank you for teaching us today because like it not only teaching us, but confirming what we were both feeling, because I think it's important. I think we were led to you for a reason. I think that nothing is an accident. People you meet come into your life for a reason, like soul contracts, people that you're
Yes,
supposed to meat. And I think
absolutely.
this came at the right time, like your messages. And I didn't expect it to go like this. I thought it was just going to be, 9/11, like, and a little bit of that yoga and meditation. But it really turned into a conversation that, really hit home and like made me feel, definitely feel not crazy in my head, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying about relativity.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I went through. It doesn't matter what you went through. Something connects us. And that's what keeps us from feeling alone. If you really know that, then we can go through life, not okay completely, but enough so that we could say, I made it through
Yeah.
another day.
So anyone who wants to connect with Makayla, we're gonna leave her socials and the way you can connect down in the description below. So yeah, thanks again, Makayla. This was amazing. See you
Thank you
guys.
both so much for everything. So.
You're very welcome. We'll see you guys next time, Soul Sisters.